Stack, the podcast for professional online research. I'm your host, Matt Ashburn, and personally, I think the dark web was far better than the dark web rises.
And I'm Jeff Phillips, tech industry veteran and curious to a fault. Today is one of our special episodes of Needle Stack, Matt, where we're going to take questions from our live audience, and then we're going to dig into our mailbag also for questions that folks have been submitting over the recent weeks during our podcasts.
Yeah, that's right. Each week we give you guys a URL that you can go visit to give us feedback and ask questions and all those things. So we appreciate everyone that has submitted a question so far. And we've been focusing on the dark web for the past several episodes, and we've had a lot of great guests talking on things like dark web research in general, communicating with people on the dark web, and strategies around that, from protecting your security to communicating effectively, and all sorts of other interesting topics. If you've missed those, definitely go back and take a look at those. Really, really good stuff and great conversations. The dark web is one of those topics that really elicits a lot of fascination by people. There are hurdles to accessing it. You can't search for it like you would necessarily on the surface web. It's also a bit dangerous or mysterious to some people. And so we get a lot of questions on this topic. So we're excited to answer them. So let's hop right in. Jeff, what do you have for us?
Well, we're going to start. The first question we've got coming in here is one of those basic ones. And so this comes from our mailbag early on when we started the whole dark web series. But let's revisit in terms of they ask, how do I get access to the dark web? Pretty much 101.
Yeah, great question. So a very simple answer, right, to this is that anyone can get on the dark web. You know, you can download Tor. You can also pair Tor with Tails, for example. You want to have it inside of a VM for that isolation or something like that, right? But there are a few other things that you may not be aware of, right? So yes, you can, technically. There's really not a technical challenge to getting on the dark web, specifically Tor in this case. But some other things you want to keep in mind. You want to make sure that you're authorized by your organization. You also want to make sure that your organization ideally has some kind of access policy for the dark web or for research in general. Also make sure that you understand what you're getting into. There may be content that's there that may be difficult to unsee, may be objectionable. You also may be subject to drive-by malware attacks and other things, fraud, bad actors, and other things that are there. So just be aware of those dangers and go into it with eyes wide open. Or in some cases, maybe you want to close your eyes to some of the things that are there as well. Sure. Also understand that the dark web is not completely anonymous. So, if you're a bad actor, that can be a detriment to whatever you're trying to do. But to us as investigators, that can really assist us in our investigations, right? We can exploit those capabilities to de-anonymize some of those transactions and uncover people. On that note, a really good episode to check out would be episode 13. It's called Ready to Turn Out the Light, an intro to the dark web if you're looking for maybe more introductory level information on getting on the dark web.
And I echo listening to that episode, because as you point out, anyone can go as simple as download Tor and off you go, you would think, but there's a lot more to it than that. So a lot more important things to consider beyond just the technology side. So check out that episode. Yeah. Okay. Our next question is in a similar vein regarding access, but I think this is pretty interesting. So my company, the question is, or statement starts off, my company doesn't allow access to the dark web, but it would be valuable for my research. So can I access it safely from a personal device? What do you think about that?
So there's a bit of a caveat there. So yes, you can access it from a personal device, but can you do so safely? I guess it depends on your definition of safely, but in general, I would recommend against that because of a number of reasons, right? Mostly for your own security and your own anonymity and your own privacy, right? You're using a personal device for accessing something that may be objectionable. Maybe there may be content there that could be illegal in some cases. And you don't want to compromise that personal device with malware also that could be on the dark web. So but just be cautious of that. I would recommend against it unless it's maybe as a last resort or something like that. Also keep in mind, as always, organizational policies, right, may prohibit that. So make sure you know your organization's policies as it pertains to using personal devices as well. But yeah, look out for yourself. Look out for your own privacy and your own personal safety as well. And if you're doing it do so, one, in compliance with your organization's policy, and also do it in a safe manner. So obviously the previous answer as well, right? Take all that into consideration to get on the dark web in a safe manner.
Good stuff. Okay. I like this question. How do I know? Because we've talked a lot about the dark web through this set of podcasts being a great resource, but the question is, how do I know if my company's being referenced on the dark web if I can't access it? So if I can't get access to it, how do I know if there's stuff going on the dark web related to my company?
Yeah, great question. So in many cases, when there is some kind of compromise of data, the dark web, Tor specifically, these dark web markets that are out there, they're often the first places that your organization's breach data can land, right? From compromised credentials, third-party leaks, ransomware dump listings, rather. It's also a source for invaluable threat intelligence, right? So getting information on perhaps pre-planned attacks or discussion around vulnerabilities and exploits, all those things, those are very helpful. So you're right. Whoever asked this question, you're absolutely right. It is valuable to get on to Tor, get on the dark web marketplaces, and understand what's going on, what's being said about your organization or your company. Because it is a good source of intelligence and also a good source of breached data as well. So as far as accessing it, you can certainly go do all that stuff manually. You can do searches and all those things fairly routinely on a periodic basis. That can get really old really quickly, right? So also take a look at some of the threat intel platforms that are out there. There are also a number of other companies that are specifically focused on dark web information. So they'll essentially they'll scrape these markets, they'll take all the information, catalog it, archive it, index it to make it easily searchable. You can even set up alerts, for example, for certain key terms. And if one of those comes up, you'll get an alert and you can be directed to that source document. So lots of those out there. All the major threat intel platforms that are out there that are worth their salt also have something similar to this, some service like this, right?
That's interesting. So it'll give you the alerts. You can set in keywords, and then it'll alert you, and then you have to make the decision whether you're going to go and investigate it, I suppose. And the other thing I've seen a lot of ads for now lately, not a lot, but a fair amount on the personal side, where people will go out and companies will do scans for your personal information, is your own personal credit card or your personal email ending up on the dark web. So there are definitely, if you just Google that, lots of companies offering scans and monitoring tools to take advantage of.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. We had some really interesting guests. We did talk a lot about marketplaces and what's going on across those different marketplaces. So this guest one of our listeners has actually asked, what are the top dark web marketplaces that are out there today?
Good question. So the answer for what's active today is not necessarily the answer for what will be active tomorrow. So keep that in mind. The nature of darknet marketplaces is such that they will be shut down only to pop up somewhere else. So any kind of list that you see of dark web marketplaces will change pretty frequently. So as an example, Alphabay is a great one, right? It's was focused on narcotics and cybercrime. Probably the largest dark web marketplace ever, and it was actually taken down by law enforcement in 2017. But today it is actually back and better than ever, right? Or so they say. The number 2 admin recently resurrected Alphabay, and it's gaining a lot of market dominance as other marketplaces are shut down. And the key benefit of Alphabay, at least from the criminal's perspective, is that it allows the use of Monero, which makes it very difficult to track and analyze transactions. Rather than Bitcoin, it's much more difficult, if not impossible, to track Monero. It's much more privacy focused, right? And there's a number of other marketplaces that are out there as well, right? So you have ASAP, Abacus, Archetype, Vice City Market, Bohemia, and there are even some regional specific markets that are out there as well. So for example, We the North only caters to customers in Canada. So that may be of interest to some of the folks in the audience as well. There are also lots of surface websites that are out there that profile all the various markets, and they also track takedowns and all those things as well. So an example of that would be darknet1.com is one of those sites that tracks that type of stuff.
stuff. Let me check here what our next question is. Well, you mentioned crypto, so let's go with this one. The question is, what are the best tools to analyze cryptocurrency transactions? And the person mentions that I've heard about Chainalysis, but are there alternatives or different ways to go about analyzing crypto?
So Chainalysis is the one I was going to mention, mostly because it's the heavy hitter that's out there, right? It's been used in lots of high-profile investigations, and it's really changed the game in blockchain analysis. For a long time, people just assumed that cryptocurrency, possibly because it was maybe complicated to use or required special tools or was just kind of obscure, people just assumed that it was untraceable, right? They assumed it was anonymous. The transactions, keep in mind, are not really anonymous. They're more confidential, right? And there's a distinction there that's important, right? Because in Bitcoin, for example, the blockchain is a public register of transactions. So you have the sender address, the receiver address, and the amount exchanged. And people just assume, oh, well, it's not my name that's on there, it's just my wallet address. Well, over time, as we've talked about previously with other things related to internet research, these little breadcrumbs over time can create a nice trail for somebody to uncover who you are and what you're doing. So the same is true for blockchain analysis, right? You can take a look at that. Somebody can go take the blockchain, take that public register, and go analyze it, store it off, right? And so if you want to see who is transferring data to whom or who's transferring money to whom, you can do that pretty easily. You can also uncover things like maybe mixing and essentially laundering money through a series of chains there to try to obscure the source of the destination, right? But as certainly we've mentioned Chainalysis there, even in the question, they're the big hitter, right? But as cryptocurrency becomes more popular, more tools are popping up. A couple of those, True Narrative, for example, LexisNexis, they're offering.
Mhm.
Also, Crystal, they're geared towards law enforcement and financial services institutions. And also, Coinbase Analytics is another one. They're also geared towards financial services and government customers, too. Keep in mind, some of these services are built for e-commerce. Some are also built for financial services. So think lending, know your customer, anti-money laundering, all those different use cases.
Good stuff. Well, we're kind of with our questions here. Crypto was definitely a popular episode. So, and you mentioned Monero. So this person asks, how does blockchain analysis work from Monero? If it's private, what can you actually do here?
Great question. So yeah, I did mention Monero earlier and kind of teased that it's a bit more privacy focused. So yeah, appreciate the question from the person that asked that. So because blockchain analysis has been proven effective in analyzing Bitcoin transactions, it's really helped to spawn a number of privacy-oriented cryptocurrencies, like Monero is one of those, that are essentially untraceable, right? They're designed with privacy in mind. And in simple terms, the details are obfuscated, right? You can't identify the sender and receiver addresses, the amount exchanged, the address balance, or transaction histories. That's because they use ring signatures, which groups the sender's address with other addresses that are in play. And stealth addresses also allow recipients to receive funds without revealing the owner, which is good too, from a privacy perspective, obviously. Also, transaction amounts are encrypted, so that's yet another step. So Monero is also fungible. So when you think of that, their coins are not unique. Whereas, if I pull out a dollar bill, for example, every dollar bill has a serial number that's attached to it. And each Bitcoin, for example, each Bitcoin's transaction history is logged into the public blockchain. So Monero doesn't have those issues from a privacy perspective. All these safeguards and untraceability have really made it also very attractive for illicit activity. As many things that are starting out to be privacy focused, criminals can also exploit that privacy focus as well. So some exchanges have actually banned it for those reasons, making Monero less attractive if you have some hope there to exchange it for fiat currencies, right? Or to have just widespread use. But it is used on a number of dark web marketplaces. And as with everything, there's always that game of cat and mouse or arms race between investigators hoping to crack its privacy or exploit some vulnerability in the system, and also whatever the next iteration of this is.
Lots of moving parts with in keeping up with crypto and what's happening in that world. Okay, this looks like our last question, sir. That we had one of our attendees ask is. I remember there was a discussion on one of the episodes around PGP encryption being used to securely communicate on the dark web. So the question is, what is PGP encryption? How do you get it? How do you use it in terms of communicating securely on the dark web?
Yeah, great question. So pretty good privacy, PGP, has been around for, gosh, I guess 30 years now. It was invented in 1991, and it's the de facto standard for email security. It actually came up in our interview with investigative journalist Eileen Ornsby and how she communicates with confidential sources, and including some that are on the dark web, right? It's important to note that PGP, like all encryption, right, it encrypts the message and the content, but it doesn't make you anonymous. Emails sent through or PGP or via PGP encryption can actually be traced to a sender and recipient. So you see that sender A sent it to person B, but the metadata is all there in the clear. So when I say metadata of the date, time, the from, the to, even the the IP address information perhaps may be visible, as well as the subject line, right? These are all things that are on essentially the envelope of the message, but the contents within the envelope are encrypted. So don't put anything sensitive, for example, in the subject line. PGP works by a key that's generated by the sender and only used to send one message. That's the session key. The session key and the message sent are sent to the recipient. The message is protected in transit by the receiver's public key. So the receiver's private key is really the only way to decrypt the session key and actually view the message. Anybody can download software, by the way, that does this to generate your public and private keys and send PGP encrypted messages. There's also a ton of tutorials out there on YouTube and a number of other websites. So if you found that confusing at all, definitely check out some really good guides that are out there on getting started with PGP. It's stood the test of time. It's a great resource, and it's out there for you to use. And
awesome.
I think
Matt, that was our last question.
I think so. Yeah, I don't see any other questions popping in here.
I do not.
Yeah. So, well, we appreciate it. Thanks for everybody who's watching and listening, and we appreciate everybody who submitted questions today and any other time that's been in the mailbag. So we really appreciate you guys tuning in as well. If you liked what you heard today, as always, you can subscribe to NeedleStack wherever you get your podcast. You can also watch episodes on YouTube and view transcripts and other episode info, or send us questions if you'd like on our website, Authenticate. That's authentic with the number 8.com/NeedleStack. And be sure to follow us at NeedleStack_pod on Twitter. And we'll be back, of course, next week with more online research tips, tricks, and experts in the field in July. See you then.